You okay? Okay. Welcome back, and we're going to have a talk now from Kathryn Connolly, and after that then it'll open to questions, if any of you have any questions. And so we'll hear Kathryn's talk first. Kathryn is the supervisor at Westport House and lead tour guide. She's an honours degree in history and heritage, graduating from ATU Castlebar in 2015. She began work in Westport House in March 2016 when the house was still owned by the Brown family, and has been part of the transition of ownership to the Hugheses of Westport. She spent a vast amount of time discovering and researching about the Brown family and their home, and has immersed herself in the history of Westport House and is passionate about the story. Kathryn has had her own blog delving into the many stories, writing about the architecture and restoration of the magnificent Georgian manor. She's had some problems with a computer, and she hasn't been able to show you the tours that people had around the parapets of the Westport House, and anybody that I knew that was on it said it was a fantastic tour, and the restoration that they've put into the house since they took it over is just amazing. Today she's going to speak about the Brown family, the architecture and the restoration of the Georgian manor.
Thanks everybody. So you're all very welcome and delighted to be asked to speak here, so thanks very much. Today my focus is just going to be on the Brown family itself, and the architecture of the house and the restoration project that we were running at the moment. So just going back to our beginning, and it's family tradition that the Brown family came from Cowdray Castle, from Sir Anthony Brown, who was Master of the Horse to Henry VIII, and his son John then came to the Neil in a little town outside Ballinrobe, and he was the first, or the High Sheriff of Mayo at that stage. And he had a son Josias, and then we come to our man here, Colonel John Brown, who came over to the Westport here in the mid-1600s, and he married Grace O'Malley's great-great-granddaughter, Maud Burke, and this is where the connection with the Brown family to Grace O'Malley, it's through that marriage there. There's just a few things I want to cover. So Colonel John was a Catholic Jacobite, he was a trained lawyer, he had his own ironworks, and he was also a signatory on the Treaty of Limerick alongside of Patrick Sarsfield. So he had his fingers in many pies, and when he came here to Westport, he actually bought up an awful lot of land. So he got wealthy really, really quickly, and being a Catholic Jacobite, he was on the wrong side of the Williamite Jacobite wars, and he lost absolutely everything. He lost all of his money, and he lost most of his land, getting himself severely into debt. So what does the man do when he gets himself into debt? Well, he faked his own death. He said he died 7 years before he actually did, but there's still documentation. He said he died in 1704, and he was still signing documents during that time, but his official death is 1711. So he was a very kind father. He left all of that debt to his son Peter, or poor Peter as we call him here. Peter was also Catholic, and Peter married a lady called Mary Daly. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. He raised his 2 daughters Catholic, and he raised his only son Protestant. This was during the penal laws, and the penal laws meant that Catholics couldn't amass any kind of wealth or retain any land. So this is how you get around that. So it was his son, John Brown, that he raised a Protestant, that built the first phase of Westport House that you're actually sitting in today. So the front steps that you came in, the front doors, have always been the front doors of Westport House. But originally it was only 1 room deep, only as far as the 3 arches in the main hall, just past this wall here, was the first phase of Westport House. So John actually commissioned a German architect by the name of Richard Castles to come and build the first phase of the house, and he's responsible for Westport House, Carton House, Powers Court, and our government buildings, Leinster House as well. His signature is that incredible barrel vaulted ceiling that you see out in the hall with the coffered ceiling. It really is incredible. So John Brown himself was quite an interesting man. He was got heavily involved in politics. He was actually only 21 years old when he built the first phase of Westport House. I know what I was at when I was 21. I certainly wasn't building a beautiful Georgian manor, but he also got heavily involved in politics, and he got himself the titles Baron Mounteagle, Viscount Mayo, and the Earl of Altamont. So he made his money through the linen and flock trade here in Westport. And so talking a little bit about Richard Castles. Richard Castles is actually a really interesting man as well. So the house was built, we say, between 1730 and 1734. And if you look closely at the bridge when you're going back out, it's one of the oldest bridges here in Westport. There is halfway down on the left-hand side when you're walking out a little marking on the wall saying 1734. And Richard Castles was actually was fascinated by hydrology and water and the way that water worked. So Richard's actually also responsible for the cascades that you see out on the river there. So this is the Carbeg River that runs through the estate. And so the cascades were made to look like Mother Nature herself put them there, but they didn't. She didn't. It was Richard Castles, and that was the style at the time for everything to look as natural as possible. But so a gentleman called Richard Pocock was a travel writer, and he did a tour of Ireland in 1752. And I'm just going to quote what he wrote. He came here to Westport House. I'm just going to write or read a little quote from him. So he says, Mr. Brown's house is very pleasantly situated on the south side of the rivulet, over which he has built 2 handsome bridges and has formed cascades on the river, which are seen from the front of the house, which is built from hewn stone, a coarse marble they have here. It has a pavilion over the attic story in which there is a large convenient bedchamber for the young people. So if you look at the front of the house, there's 3 windows at the very top, and that's what he's talking about there. The bedchamber is the size of the hall. The design is with 9 windows on a floor and for 5 rooms, one of which a back wing, which is not built. So this is during the time when the main house was still only 1 room deep. It is an exceedingly good house and well finished. The design and execution of Mr. Castles. Mr. Brown designs to move the village and its park improvement all round. There are fine low hills every way which are planted and improved, and the trees grow exceedingly well. The tide comes just up to the house, and the cascades are fine salmon leaps. In the house are handsome chimney pieces of the Castlebar black marble. I didn't even know such a thing, without any white in them. So, as Anne was saying earlier on, the back of the house, when it was just 1 room deep, was another bay in Clew Bay, and actually the Atlantic Ocean would have come right up to the exterior wall of the house in the 1730s. In the 1770s, the Browns reclaimed all that land. It took them about 10 years to do it, and they finished off the main square of the house that you see today. They also added the south wing of the house, which was built in 1778, and the date is actually over the pavilion on the house. And then the north wing was added in 1816. So, and also in this, you see that the original town of Westport was outside the front of the house here, we think, over this direction here, known as Cahernamart, or Stone Fort of the Bees. And the plans were obviously in place in 1754. When John Brown was the first Earl, that they were going to move the town, and it was implemented by his son, the second Earl of Altamont, Peter Brown. They found this advertisement in a Dublin newspaper that Peter Brown of Westport House and the architect William Leeson were looking for stonemasons and labourers to come and build the new town of Westport. Westport is one of the first planned towns in Ireland, and we're very fancy because most towns are built around a square, but we're built around an octagon, and that was to show the wealth and the status of the family here. So going on to Peter Brown. So Peter Brown married Elizabeth Kelly. Now Elizabeth Kelly, as I mentioned already, was the daughter of a man called Dennis Kelly. She was the only child of a man called Dennis Kelly from Listuff in County Galway, and he was immensely wealthy. He had a huge amount of land, a huge amount of property. He was Chief Justice of Jamaica. And so she inherited all of that, including those 2 estates that she brought with her, the sugar plantation and the farm. And that all that money came here to Westport House. So with this, the status went up in the house, the wealth went up in the house, and all was good in the world. The original entrance to Westport Estate would have been over this direction here, kind of along where the Holy Trinity church is. There would have been the main gate there, and carriages would have driven down here from this direction towards the house. So coming in through Westport, you came in through this beautifully laid out town, knowing you were going somewhere fancy, basically, and the coaches would come down here. Some of these trees that you see out here are over 200 year old. It's just amazing to think that they are still there today. So Dennis Kelly had no sons and quite upset at this fact, and he made a little proviso that Peter Brown had to be called Peter Brown Kelly, and that any sons they may have had to have the name Dennis. So they kept rigid to this. Peter Brown was Peter Brown Kelly, and they had two sons. One was John Dennis and the other was Dennis. So they kept very much the toe of the line. So their oldest son, John Dennis, became the third Earl of Altamont. And he probably was, and you might agree with me there, he was probably the pinnacle of wealth, John Dennis, during his time here. He would have owned up to 200,000 acres going into County Mayo, going into County Galway. And he was a big farmer. He really improved the land agriculturally. Another travel writer that came here in 1777 was a man called Arthur Young, and he used to write very negatively about the landlord system and the landlord ways, but he spoke very positively about John Dennis and his works here to improve the land. So that was good. But he also, John Dennis, supported the Act of 1800. And this is what unites Ireland with Britain. So for supporting the Act, he was rewarded with the title Marquess of Sligo. And as you know, we are all in County Mayo. There is no connection with County Sligo whatsoever. And the way that they worked it, there was already a personal title in the other counties. Sligo had nobody, and that's how he became Marquess of Sligo. So we've actually no connection. John Dennis married Louisa Kathryn Howe, who was the daughter of Admiral Richard Howe, who commanded the Channel Fleet of the Battle of the 1st of June 1794 during the French Revolutionary Wars. So John Dennis is also responsible for the design of one of our most famous rooms, which is the large dining room. It's attributed to James Wyatt, the architect, who based it on the Wedgwood design. And seemingly the family were delighted themselves when this room was completed, so much so that they threw a huge party here in the house, and seemingly Westport House was party central back in the day, so they did like their parties. So John Dennis and Louisa Kathryn had their wonderful, very colourful child, Howe Peter Brown. And I know Anne has spoken an awful lot about him. I'll just throw in one little story which I love, that Howe Peter was on his grand tour, as was the wont of wealthy young men, and he headed off to places like Greece and Italy, but he was fascinated by Greek mythology and all of that. So that's why there is a Greek sarcophagus, if you're wondering what that is, at the middle of the green out there, that he brought home in 1812, a little 3,000-year-old grave. Why wouldn't you have one in your back garden? So he brought that home as well, but he also went to the Atreus Temple in Mycenae in Greece. Outside this temple, there were 3,000-year-old columns, and he thought, wouldn't they be lovely in Westport? So he took them, or was given them. And he put them on his ship. But this wasn't the problem. The problem was that he had a bad ship and a drunk crew, so he decided to enlist the help of 2 British naval officers to help him bring these columns home. And so this was during the Napoleonic Wars. The British government found out, absolutely furious, and they had him arrested and sentenced to 4 months in Newgate Prison in England. But his mother, being a widow at the time, got very taken with the judge that had overseen her son's case. And on the day, she thought he was a nice man, a fair man, and most importantly, she liked the way he handled her son. So on the day of Howe Peter's release, 4 months later, she married the judge. Isn't that lovely and romantic? It's really nice. I don't think it wasn't to last. The judge was quite judgy at home, and he was very tight with the purse strings, so they went their separate ways. But I do think myself he had served his purpose at that stage. But so, as I say, and Howe Peter does redeem himself as he came older and became governor of Jamaica, and the emancipation of the slaves that I went into there. And as she said, that he did marry Hester Catherine de Burgh, the 13th Earl of Clonrickard's daughter from Portunna Castle in County Galway. And together they had 14 children. So that's what happens when you've no telly. That's the way it goes. So Howe Peter died in 1845, and it was his son George that became the 3rd Marquess of Sligo. Now George did a huge amount of additions to the house at that stage, including this incredible parquet floor that you're standing on here. It's one of the finest examples of parquet in Ireland. It's made from Irish oak, and it has an inlay of ebony in there as well. He also he replaced all of the sash windows that were originally in the house, and he put in these beautiful double opening casement windows in the 1850s. The story is that the family were sitting down for dinner in the large dining room when the Atlantic wind blew in one of the sash windows across the family table into the fireplace, narrowly missing the family having their dinner. So he said, we're replacing the windows, and this is what he replaced them with. And he also did the marble stairs. He put in the Sicilian marble stairs. The Sicilian marble, he actually got the craftsman to come over to put them into the house. These stairs are cantilever. They're absolutely amazing. They completely support themselves. So each step would have gone in separately, and as much marble as you see coming out of the wall, it's in the wall as well, and that's what keeps it all balanced. It's just incredible. He also bought or purchased the Angel of Welcome at the top of the stairs. He picked her up on his holidays in Rome in 1863, and she's been here since 1865. So a beautiful addition to the house, as you can imagine. It was tradition that the family, when they came home from school or from holidays, that they would go up the stairs and they would shake that outstretched hand of the angel. It is supposed to bring good luck and prosperity to whoever does it. So obviously I do it every day, and sometimes twice a day, depending on how my day is going. But you are all. Make sure before you go, have a little touch for hand and do the lotto and think of me if you win on them. So George actually, as I say, was the famine Marquis here as well. The family closed the house during the time of the famine. They moved into a smaller home in the centre of town. We do have an exhibition upstairs of Hester Kathryn's letters. They're written during the time, and they were actually collected by the largest family museum in the world, which is at the Quinnipiac University in Connecticut, and they sent over those letters to us here, and we have them on display upstairs. And they do show a sense of an awareness and of compassion during that time as well, which is which is good, because not a lot of the landlords obviously were absentee. So George actually had quite a tragic life. He lost his first and second wife through to sickness, and lost two of his daughters as well. He had no sons, so this is where the issue of having no sons comes in. So this when George passed away in 1896, the title of Marquis went to his brother John. John was the fourth Marquis of Sligo, and he was big into farming, big into agricultural, and really developed the farm that was here at the time. He died unmarried, no children, so it went passed on to his brother, who was Henry Ulick, went on to become the fifth Marquis of Sligo. Now Henry made up for everybody else. He had 10 children, and only 8 of them actually survived to adulthood. So Henry married a lady called Henrietta Kathryn Dickon, and they had celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in 1905. And there's actually a wonderful picture out near the oak staircase celebrating this occasion. They went all out. They went absolutely, had lots of parties to celebrate. Their children bought them a beautiful golden cup to celebrate this wonderful occasion. And they planted 4 copper beech trees around the estate. 3 of them still survive today, so they're still on the estate. Upstairs, I have a little office upstairs in one of the closed rooms, and I was sharing this room with piles of books and plastic bags full of stuff, and I just didn't know, I'd never had the time to look through them. Well, COVID definitely gave me an opportunity, and I know Anne has seen all of these, but there was scrapbooks, there was diaries, there was old photographs. I came across such an amazing amount of stuff, including a scrapbook that the 5th Marchioness kept during this time, where she has her lovely little invitation in an envelope. It's gold rimmed because it's the golden wedding anniversary, a little gold thread and a gold pencil so you can RSVP. It was all very well done, and in it she has they threw a servants party to celebrate this as well. She has every single person, John and Mary O'Reilly plus 5 children. She has them all named, absolutely everyone that's invited. I know there's some of you here looking about family. There could be something, I don't know who was Uzi actually was asked me, there could be something in there, but leave it with me. I'll be doing something with that later. And so this was fascinating to find all of this. She used to keep newspaper cutouts of every time the family was mentioned. Of course, if the Marquis and Marchioness left the house for any time, it would be put into the paper, and she used to diligently cut it out and stick it into her scrapbook, and that's upstairs. It's an amazing read. She also wrote a diary about her life called My Reminiscence, and I immediately liked her when I opened the front cover, and it said, this is a story of, I'm not quoting directly, but this is a story of my life and how we lived and how we worked, and if you don't like it, just put the book down. And I liked her immediately. So that was Henry Ulick and Kathryn Henry. This actually spent quite a lot of time in India. And a lot of the swords and different things that you see around the house would have come from this time. So when Henry died in 1913, his son George Ulick became the 6th Marquess. Now, this was during the time just before World War I, and he remained in Westport House for a lot of World War I. And although he didn't do anything magnificently to change the house, he did a lot of important work like the plumbing, the electricity, and also, he did actually do something wonderful, which was put the west terraces out on the back of the house. These terraces were his pride and joy. He was delighted himself with them. So he married a lady called Agatha Stewart Hodgson, and they had 4 children together, and it was George's son Ulick that became the 7th Marquess of Sligo. And we know very little about George Ulick. I've only seen there's actually that little portrait of the boy is him as a young boy, but there's I've only one other picture of him, a photograph where he's very kind of dandy looking with the big top hat, and he died very young. He was only 41 when he passed away of cancer. But again, upstairs I found letters where there was a lady called Helen. I'd be interested to know if you know who this Helen is. She stayed here for the entirety of World War II, and she describes his funeral like detail by detail, and describes him as a wonderful man, and that all the locals loved him. Even the RCs went to his funeral, which was the Roman Catholics. So, that's all I really know about him. And then because the 7th Marquess died, again with no sons, it went back up the line to Arthur Howe Brown, the brother of George Ulick. There's lots of Georges and Johns, but I know. So George Ulick, or Arthur Howe, became the 8th Marquess of Sligo. And this is where things, for me, it got interesting. He was an avid historian and a photographer. And he kind of took over. He became the 8th Marquess about 1941. He was in England at the time. He actually couldn't come here to the house because there was the World War II was on, and so these letters are going back and forward from this Helen to Arthur Howe, describing all the things that they're doing in the house. They found a hidden cemetery down here, or not a hidden vault in the cemetery down there, and doing changes to the church down on the grounds here as well. Really, really interesting. But he went around and he photographed a few rooms of the inside of the house. I had never seen any of these before, so they were all new to me to see Westport House, as their home. And really, because we use these main rooms here, we use them for functions, we do weddings, we do book launches, we do lovely little lectures like today. So really, to see it as the family home really brought it home for me, that this was their house. It was beautiful, it was comfortable, and especially the room behind us here, the long gallery, which we have completely bare. It's a huge, just nearly like a hallway through. It was beautifully carpeted. There's actually, if you go in there, there's a discoloration on halfway down on the left-hand side, and in it, I always wondered what was that about, and that was because there was a massive, almost to the ceiling marble statue there. They were filled with furniture, beautiful plush curtains, and it just was, this is just lovely. It was a beautiful home. So when Arthur passed away, it went to his brother Terence, who became the 9th Marquess of Sligo. He was only the Marquess for a year. I know very little about him. All I know, he spent a lot of his time in India. He passed away in 1952, and that's when our Dennis and Josie come into play here. So in 1953, Dennis was Jeremy's father, got the unexpected call that he was now the 10th Marquess of Sligo, and here was Westport House. The family, Dennis, Josie and their only child was Jeremy, were living seemingly a bohemian hippie kind of life in London when they got this call, and they decided to come over to Westport House. In 1953, the money was gone. The house had gone into pretty bad shape, the gardens were overgrown, and the small family were overwhelmed. Really, what were they going to do with a place like this? So they had three options: to sell it, demolish it, or do something with it. So thank goodness they decided to do something with it. And in 1960, they opened Westport House to the public. This was something that they had been doing in England quite a bit to supplement income coming into the house, but not so much in Ireland, because the Irish history of the big house was quite strange, to want for another word. But people are nosy and they want to see what the inside of the house looked like. So people did come. And in 1960, Jeremy was 21 years of age and had fallen in love with Westport House and really wanted to bring it back to its former glory, and really wanted to fill it with light and love again, and he absolutely managed to do so. He was very innovative. There was no such thing as tourism in the west of Ireland in the 60s or even 70s, so he just tried everything. So we've had a zoo here, as many of you might know. I'm talking lions, tigers and elephants. We've had music festivals, we've had circuses, he opened the caravan and camping, the pirate-themed children's park, and let's not forget the giant pink bunny, Pinky, as well, roaming the halls. A lot of traumatised kids in the 1980s, but it worked a treat, and people came here in droves. They couldn't get enough of the place. So Jeremy married Jennifer Cooper, and together they had 5 daughters, which is wonderful, but it's a problem, as title and ownership could only be passed to a male heir. So in 1993, after 17 years of just trying to change breaking the trust, Jeremy would decide to trust who's young to say he would have passed the title and ownership onto his male heir, which he did not have. So eventually that trust was broken. And it meant that when Jeremy passed away in 2014, that all of his 5 daughters inherited the house. But his title is gone. It's gone to his next in line, who is his cousin, Sebastian Brown, who's a real estate agent in Sydney, Australia, and is now the 12th Marquess of Sligo. And that's how it goes. So the girls did inherit the house. And as I say, I started working here in 2016. The sale of the house was announced kind of around December 2015. And for that whole year, and the girls worked incredibly hard. I saw them myself here. Sheila, as you know, would be up changing light bulbs and out digging out weeds. There was no airs and graces around here at all. But they simply couldn't hang on to the house. The family had got themselves into debt, and this is why the house had to be put on the market. But for that whole year, we didn't know who was going to buy the place or what were they going to do with it. Would we have jobs? Would Westport House be open to the public? We had no idea. But in January 2017, I got a very early wake-up morning call to get into work quick that the house had been sold. And this is when it was announced that the Hugheses of Westport have bought the house, the 400 acres, and most importantly for me, the entire collection as well, keeping the collection. It was the original sale was for the house and the 400 acres, and the contents were to be sold separately. I actually look after all the collection here, so very close to my heart. So delighted that they bought the whole lot, the whole kit and caboodle. And it's just been an absolute game changer for us. If you don't know who the Hugheses are, they're 3 brothers, Owen, Connolly and Harry Hughes. They own Hotel Westport, which is on the estate here, and they also own the global company Port West, which is a very successful company, and thank goodness we need all the cash. So they bought the house. Their great grandfather would have been a tenant farmer out on the estate, and he would have paid his rent to the landlord here. So it has come full circle, and it's gone from one Westport family to another. So it is great news for the house and for the town here as well. So with that, over the last, it probably started in 2018 when we had conservation architects come to the house for the first time. We've had the Irish Georgian Society, the Heritage Council, Mayo County Council have all come to see what can be done with Westport House. There's a huge amount of work to be done was at that stage to the outside and to the inside of the house. So just to kind of let you know what we've been doing over the last year and a half, we started in March 2021, and it was all on the external part of the house. So the house was in very bad condition. There was a lot of leaks coming into the house, so we wanted to make it watertight. A lot of health and safety issues as well. So with the restoration, we have lead-lined 50 chimney pots on the roof of Westport House. We have completely lead-lined the roof of the main house, and also if you look out this window, you can see the lead lining on the north wing of this wing here as well. This is a limestone building. The limestone would have been taken from the quarry here on the estate, and limestone is really porous, it needs to breathe. And about 100 years ago, the house was completely repointed with cement. So what cement does, it locks in moisture, it doesn't let the house breathe, and this is where a lot of our problems with damp and water ingress came from this as well. So most of the house has been repointed. The whole west side of the house, if you see, it looks completely different. The ivy had to be cut down. It has been completely rendered with this limestone mortar. And what's happening to the inside of the house, it's starting to breathe again. And really, I can feel this has been a complete change in the atmosphere inside the house. We've also done the small little job of restoring 104 windows and doors of the house. So every single window and door that you see on the exterior of the house was taken out in 3 phases. So as I say, these are not the original windows, so these are the 1850s windows, and they were taken off to a company called Timeless in County Meath, and they took them out in 3 phases and restored them. So they were able to restore about 90% of them, and here they are. So they look absolutely amazing. They're made from European oak. The brass fittings that you see on them as well is also 1850s, and they were sent off to a company in Dublin who said they'd never seen such good quality brass come through their doors, and they were able to bring them back to their almost original finish. They really are incredible. It's single pane glass, and we had to leave it that way. We had to, so we could only put back what we took out. So it is still single glaze, but actually double glazing would make the house too airtight. This house needs to breathe, so it's all worked out. If you're walking around the house, you will see that there's now a lot of flaking paint, a lot of plaster loose and things like that. The house is drying out, and this is what's going to happen over the next little while. So we're hoping to start phase 2 of the interiors of the house over the next 12 to 24 months. Really, really exciting, but we'll be starting off with the real mundane stuff like rewiring and plumbing before we can get into interior stuff. But, you know, and the other thing that we did actually, which was pretty amazing, is if any of you have been through the house before, you know that we have a Chinese room upstairs. The Chinese room is an incredible room. In this room there was 200-year-old hand-painted Chinese wallpaper, and this wallpaper, there's a massive crack going from the long gallery, large dining room up into the Chinese room, and this wallpaper was being impacted by this crack and by damp, and so it had to be taken down. This wallpaper, if you haven't seen it, there's no repetition as you look around whatsoever, and everything in it is symbolic. It means something. It's about life, depicting life in China, what life is like, and as I say, everything is symbolic. So if somebody's wearing a red hat or have a red pouch, it means something politically, socially, economically. It all has a meaning. So this wallpaper had to come down. So last year, a man called David Skinner and his colleague Ros Devitt came here for a week, and they literally spent a full week with a little squirty can of water, like an artist's palette knife, and took down 16 sheets of incredible 200-year-old wallpaper. So it has been taken down. It is being stored in one of the closed rooms upstairs. It's been stored horizontally on kind of breathable material, which is helping it dry out as well. It will be cleaned, it will be restored, and it will be rehung back up in the room when we sort out all the issues with the cracks and different things that are going on in the house. So the other thing that we did as well was removal of the west terraces. So the entire terraces that were put in 100 years ago by George Ulick, the 6th Marquess, was taken out completely. Anyone that has walked it in the last couple of years would know it had gone really, really bad. It was subsiding, a lot of trip hazards there. It was completely taken out and completely reinstated to its original design 100 years ago. It's looking magnificent. I only walked it this morning myself. It is looking really, really good. And the last thing that we did was the front steps. A lot of people tripping up the steps to Westport House, but no longer. So they took out the last 4 steps of the front steps and took down the 2 side walls right down to the foundations, and they fixed, whatever they do to make it right again. And they built up the 2 side walls and put back the 4 steps, and they're completely even now. So no more tripping up the steps of Westport House. Just to also let you know that we have received Fáilte Ireland funding, one of the largest funding they've ever given. A single project has been given to us here at Westport House. They've given us 20.2 million towards our future projects here. It's been a game changer for us, and what we're hoping to do with this money is to put some beautiful formal gardens out the back of the house. We are going to reopen the wall garden, the 6 acres of wall garden, with another beautiful garden experience, and also we're going to do a Grace Connolly experience telling the story of our wonderful Pirate Queen here on the estate. So, and the rest of the money is going to go towards the interiors of the house, addressing all these issues that are ongoing inside the house as well. So it's exciting times for us here, and it really is been epic to say the least. And yeah, so that's kind of where we are with the restoration. And yeah, it's, as I say, it'll be ongoing for the next probably 2 to 3 years, maybe more. We'll see how it goes, you know, with these things. So that's me pretty much done. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll chat to you again.